My name is Nancy Tremaine. I was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1949. I'm the middle of 5 children. And for me, it all began the summer of 1961 in July. And I have it narrowed down to a 3-day period. It's taken me almost 7 years to narrow it down to a 3-day period in July 26th, 27th, or 28th of July 1961, Novi, Michigan. And back then, Novi, Michigan was still a village. It was just all trees, dirt roads, very undeveloped. And we were one of the first houses being built in the Willowbrook subdivision at that time. And this is how it began for me. My dad came home from work at 6:05 every night, like clockwork. And he told me that I could go to my girlfriend Cindy's house to play. And even though it was a beautiful summer day, we had chosen to play inside. And her father yelled for us to come outside, and we could hear urgency in his voice. And as we walked out that front door, we had no idea that our lives were forever going to be changed from that moment. It was like the part in the movie The Wizard of Oz where it goes from black and white to color, because our worldview was forever changed. There, hovering above a tree between our 2 homes, was a silver ship, at least the size of our 3-bedroom ranch home, but twice as tall. And it had a band of rotating lights of red, green, and white, which were either flashing or rotating. They were going so quickly we couldn't tell. No fear, just awe. It was absolutely breathtaking against the blue sky. Her father was adjusting a small tripod telescope, and he asked us if we wanted to look through it, and I couldn't believe he would ask such a question. I mean, what could he be possibly seeing that we weren't seeing? The ship was right in front of us. I mean, literally right in front of us. And neighbors had started to come out of their homes at this point. You know, there were scattered houses, and people were starting to come outside, and nobody was saying a word. You couldn't hear breathing. And we watched as a Novi police car pulled around the corner where we were gathered, and you could actually hear the stones hitting the tires. It was going so slowly. And it parked right in front of where we were all gathered. And the 2 officers exited the car, never turning their backs to the ship. And they walked up the incline and joined us. And I was still trying to process what I was seeing. Was this real? I couldn't process it. And I grabbed the one officer's arm, and I tried to voice 3 simple words, and it went into slow motion. And I said, "Is this real?" He never said a word. Oh. It was the first time I'd seen fear in a man's face. And we watched as a car was coming down Meadowbrook Road towards us. And underneath the ship, it's heading towards the ship, coming towards us. And we know that who's ever in this car sees the ship. We're wondering how crazy these people, or whoever's in the car, could be to put themselves in a position where they're nearing this ship. And a beam of light comes out the bottom of the ship, and it's a white beam of light, and it's slowly making its way down to the car. It's aimed at the car, and we know it's going to hit the car. And I'm wondering what's going to happen when it hits this car. And the second it hit the hood of the car was immobilized. At that point, I went into mild hysteria, I believe, because I started jumping up and down. And I'm yelling, "Over here, over here," like doing jumping jacks. And Cindy's grabbing my arm, and she's saying, "Stop it, stop it." And the ship tilted on its side, and it spoke. And it said, "We see you." And I realized that the ship is alive. This is a living thing. And I grabbed the officer's arm and I said, "Do something." I mean, he had a gun. I don't know what I expected him to do. And that's the last thing I remember. The next thing I know, I'm at home with my dad, and he's kneeling on the kitchen floor, and he's holding me very tightly. And he's telling me, it's all right, you're home, you're safe. You're home, you're safe. And I'm wondering, what the heck? I look at the clock on the stove, and it's 10 minutes to 9. And the kitchen door's open, and it's almost dark outside. And my dad's not spanking me. I was never allowed out past dusk. My dad would have been kicking our ass. I mean, we got spanked back then. And he's glad to see me? I didn't understand it. It just didn't make sense. Where'd all the time go? I mean, it's 10 to 9, and it's getting dark, and I go to bed at 9 o'clock. And Dad's happy to see me. Well, that night, at some point, I must have told my dad about, I must have told him about being on board and mentioned aliens, because my dad shared a secret. He shared a secret with me that night that I was never to tell, not even my mother. And he silenced me. He grabbed me by the forearms and he shook me hard. And he said, do you understand that you are never to speak of this? Do you understand? And I was crying and I said, I understand, but I didn't. I didn't understand. And I didn't understand why. I just knew that I had memories that I had to store somewhere where no one could get to them, not even me. So I stored them in the back of my mind for 50 years. But I couldn't understand why that night and every night after that for so long, I had such an intense longing to see that ship again. And I would stand on the headboard of my bed so that I could look out of my bedroom window at that spot where that ship had hovered. And I would chant over and over again, please come back and get me. Please come back and get me. So for 50 years, it just was never spoken of. Never. Not with a friend. Not with a husband. Not with a boyfriend. Not at home. Not with my mom, my dad. I went to several therapists over the years, and I would beg each one to please hypnotize me, because I know there's something inside me that has to come out. But they wouldn't. They would give me a new diagnosis and a new medication. And I still suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, panic attacks, severe anxiety, and depression. So that's how I lived my life for 50 years. And that's how Cindy lived her life for 50 years. And there were a couple times over that half century that I tried to get her to talk about it. And all I would have to do was say, Cindy, can we talk? And she would start shaking. And I don't really think I was ready for her to talk about it either, because I would stop at that point. But 50 years went by, and it was September 1st, 2011, and I was playing on the computer, and I found a ufologist. I'd never even heard the word ufologist. I didn't know there was such a thing. You mean somebody actually studies this stuff? And his name was Dr. Harry Wellness, and he was a former Michigan State MUFON director and a researcher for over 55 years. So I knew that I could tell him. And I sent him an email. I said, I might have a story you might be interested in hearing. And he got back to me immediately. And he said, so tell me. And I said, well, I can't do that. It was on the phone. I said, I can't do that. I haven't talked about it in 50 years. The next thing I know, I'm telling him everything I could remember. And I get to the point where there's the missing time. I'm telling him how much, what the heck happened. I had no memory. So he brought in a regression therapist, Vaughn Vowles, a psychology professor and a regression therapist, and together I lovingly referred to us as the Three Musketeers. And we did 5 regressions over a very short few months period. The first regression, I thought, no, I'm too smart. I'm not going to get regressed. But I must have really been ready, because I don't remember the first hour at all. But I remember the last few minutes. I said to Vaughn, I'm running home. I'm hauling and I can run fast. They're going to get me. They're going to get me. Don't get me. Take Cindy too. I don't want to be alone. Then the next thing I know, and I knew how they were going to get me. I knew how they were going to get me. And I don't know if they told me or how I would know, but I knew, and it was going to be by a shock in my back. And as I was running, I was waiting for that shock. And when it hit me, it was like a cartoon character. I was absolutely frozen in running position, arms and legs locked. Boom. It must have been a funny sight. I went from that. Now I'm on my back, and I'm going up into the ship, and I'm in some kind of an energy wave, and it felt beautiful. It just felt beautiful. I wanted to stay in this wave forever. And Vaughn's trying to bring me out of the regression now, and I'm fighting to stay in it. And I'm telling Vaughn, my body is waving and rumbling to the low hum of the ship. And when he brought me out of that regression, I sat up and I said, it's real. It's really, really real. And I knew at that moment that there was so much more. And I became Nancy Drew, and I became my own investigator. And the first thing I did was to go after Cindy, the little 12-year-old girl who stood next to me that day in '61. And this time she was going to talk. And I had 3 illustrations at this point. And if I had to, I was going to shove them down her throat. Now, Cindy was a hardcore alcoholic at this time. And I prayed to God that she would be sober when I got to her house, or at least sober enough. And she was. So when I got there, I ordered her into her bedroom. And I said, sit. And I think she knew what was coming. And I shut the bedroom door and I sat on the opposite side of the bed. And I said, please, Cindy. And she started to shake and she said, what are you doing? And I thought, oh, no, you don't. If I have to tie you to this damn bed, you're going to talk. And I produced the second illustration and I tapped on it, commanding her to look at it. And she said, it's exactly as I remember. And when I produced the third illustration, she said, you were gone. You were missing. We couldn't find you. And I'm thinking, did she just say what I thought she said? I couldn't believe it. Did she really just say that I was missing, I was gone? So of course my first question to her was the question I'd been asking myself for 50 years. I said, Cindy, what were the first words I spoke when you saw me? Where did I tell you I had been? And without a second's hesitation, she said, outer space. Certainly the words of a 12-year-old child. We both started crying, and we held each other. And we realized that we hadn't spoken of that for 50 years. We had held that inside. And it was such a bonding moment for us to know that we had held that secret for 50 years. It's the closest I think I've ever felt to another human. And we walked into the living room where her husband Doug was sitting. And he was seated in his recliner. And I knelt down on the floor before him with the 3 illustrations. And Cindy sat in the chair across from him. We have to tell you something. And it's the truth. And Cindy kept saying, it's the truth. And I thought, my God, they've been married, 18 years, and she's never told this man. And we told him everything that we could remember. And he believed us. He believed every word we said. And he became obsessed with ufology after that. He followed it until he died a couple years after that. I think he died 2013 or 14. Cindy and I would talk on the phone about it. You know, as our memories were coming back to it, we would talk about it. And I would record our phone conversations. She remembered things that I didn't remember, and I remembered things she didn't remember, and together we pieced the story together. How we coped. I coped by men and drugs, and she coped by alcohol and attempted suicide. So that's how we coped for the 50 years. We were a mess. Our lives were a mess. And it infuriates me because it didn't have to be that way. We didn't have to be silenced. But there was a full military investigation done. And they silenced everyone in Novi. They went door to effing door. And people ask me if there were pictures taken. You can bet your ass there were pictures taken. The ship hovered for 20 minutes against a clear blue sky. Cindy's father had time enough to set up a tripod telescope, so you know there were pictures. And it was the days of the Polaroid Instamatic cameras. So I jokingly say when there were pictures taken, those pictures were taken. They flew my dad to California on a business trip. My dad never went on a business trip, ever, not once. It's the only business trip he ever took. You can hear my anger when I start talking about them. They offered my dad a job position in Australia, which he did not take. And I only recently remembered this part. My mother took me to stay with strangers. I remembered this either a year or 2 years ago. And she took me to stay with complete strangers, and I couldn't understand it. And I realized now it was to get me out of town. It was to get me out of Novi until things settled down. The only relief that the poor people in Novi had from this event was the church sermon, which I have will be posting a picture of. I found in the Novi News that was posted the following Sunday after this event. And the minister was kind enough to offer this comfort to the residents of Novi that had witnessed this and been silenced. And the sermon was titled, "The Martian Question." Even today, such a sermon would be unheard of. And he writes what the sermon's going to be about, hoping that these beings are benevolent, loving beings here to help humanity. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Cindy was found dead August 5th, 2015, on her kitchen floor, where she had laid for 2 or 3 days with her dog Lucy by her side. She had drank herself to death, literally. And I can't even express the grief of losing Cindy because she was such an important part of this. This was our story. We were supposed to tell this story together. She was supposed to stand on stage with me. And I went for a walk in the park behind my apartment the day after she was found. And behind sunglasses with snot and tears running down my face, crying. I went from grief to anger. And I said, damn you, I will never forgive you for this. You finally did it. You drank yourself to death. And she said, and I knew they were her words, those men, they came to your house. They wanted to talk to you. Your father threatened to kill them. And I knew exactly what she meant. And I remembered looking out my bedroom window and watching the Novi police lights flashing as they escorted a car up my driveway. And I remember my dad telling me, get in your bedroom and shut the door. And I remember hearing yelling and screaming. There was no way my dad was going to let them talk to me. You know, my dad was a World War II combat soldier, and you didn't mess with my dad. He had died for his kids. And it pisses me off that they wanted to talk to a 12-year-old child. How dare they? After I'd been traumatized. They didn't care. As far as I'm concerned, they murdered Cindy, and they took away my life. And that's what they do. That's our government. It's your government, people. Former Police Chief Lee Begall, who will be 98 on 4th of July, we still have phone conversations. And I begged him to tell me. I said, you know you're not getting any younger, and you've got information that I need. Please don't take it with you. And he said, and he gave me, and I recorded and quote him. And he said, they came in from the Air Force, from New Mexico or Arizona. They were military, doing an official investigation. They came in prepared to disbelieve everyone, because things like that don't happen. But they do, don't they, Nancy? They knew how to talk. They wanted to talk to everyone. They didn't want to start a panic. I think your father made a mistake in not letting you talk to them. And I said, Chief, I was only 12. And he said, well, you're a big girl now, and you can tell your story. And I got really emotional. I said, thank you, Chief. And he said, Dick Faulkner was on duty that night. Not once, twice. He said, Dick Faulkner was on duty that night, placing him at the scene. He was one of the 2 officers that stood with me and Cindy. And so I started doing some research on Dick Faulkner and found out that he became a police officer July 20th, 1961. And I said to the chief, I said, it must have scared the poop out of the officers when they saw Martin Cohen's car being immobilized. And he slipped up and he said, yeah, he said, they got in their car and took off. Which explains why in my one illustration that I have drawn of me inside the ship looking outside the window where we were standing, where there was no one there. The police car was gone and the police were gone. They left. They left 2 little 12-year-old girls. They left 2 12-year-old little girls. So when I looked out the window of that ship, the only one standing there was Cindy's father, the only one brave enough. The only one brave enough was Cindy's father. So this is why Dick Faulkner doesn't want to talk about it, because I'd be ashamed too. You know, there really wasn't much he could probably have done. But getting in his car and taking off. Well, I was on board. I remember running right past the pilot. I wasn't scared because he looked just like anybody's father. And I knew he was the pilot. And I stood in the middle of this empty room of the ship. And I remember, I don't know if I thought it or I said it, but I said, I can't believe I'm on a flying saucer. And I could feel his humor. We were telepathically communicating. He said, it's a ship. And I said, Mister, this can't be a ship. And this is how he got the name Mister that I still call him by today. Not M-I-S-T-E-R, but M-R period, with respect. I said, Mister, this can't be a ship. Because a ship is what Captain Hook was on. And a ship goes in the water. And he said, well, this does go in the water. Then next thing I remember, I'm in a room. And they tell me they want to see inside me. And I look above me, and Cindy is in a cylindrical, clear tube. And I realized now it was a holding cell. I said, get Cindy too? They had. And they had put her there. And she did a regression before she died, thank God. And she talks about being in the cylindrical tube, watching them do this procedure to me, doing something to Nancy's stomach. And she remembers being in the tube. Talk about validation. And she said, I'm dressed. I have clothes on, and I'm not scared because I'm in the tube. She said, but Nancy isn't. Nancy doesn't have any clothes on, and I didn't. And the reason they told me they wanted to see inside, they were talking to a 12-year-old. They couldn't say we were they were harvesting eggs is what they were doing, and I would never have understood what that meant. And my regression therapist said, are they doing it with malice? And I said, no, they're just doing their job. And I cried through the laparoscopy. And then after that, they placed a cylindrical metal object in my right hand, and I instinctively knew to curl my fingers around it. And I knew that they were giving me something contained within this rod. Information, whatever. But if you look at my illustration, you'll see that all the beings, they're gray beings, are looking at the same spot on the wall. They are looking at a monitor. They are monitoring what they are putting, what is contained within this rod. And I believe some of what they were giving me is what I held for 50 years inside. And I was either programmed or ready to awaken in 2011 when I did, now, to be telling my story. And they gave me a message, and I attached the message that they gave me. Take this baton and run with it. Be an ambassador. So that's what I'm doing. My main mission is to help people, to help them lose the fear and to come forward. It's in keeping the secret that causes all of the emotional and physical problems. You know, I have a woman that contacted me, and she's been married 30 years and hasn't told her husband. And I asked her if she was happily married, and she said yes. And I said, no, you're not. If you were happily married, you would tell your husband. You can't hold this inside for fear that people are going to bully you, or, I mean, I've lost friends and family, and people are afraid of me. They actually avoid me, you know. Those aren't my friends and family. And at first it hurt. And now I'm relieved. I'm relieved they're out of my life because I can tell my story. If they're ready to come back into my life at some point, wonderful, fine. If they don't, they were never family or friends. I'm healing now. I thought of myself as scar tissue. I actually voiced those words that I was scar tissue. I had no idea that I was an intelligent woman. I had no self-esteem, no self-worth. I've gone from what I was to who I am now in such a short period of time. I don't even know who that person was. So I'm glad to be doing what I'm doing. I've only seen Mr. in reptilian form one time, and that was when I was 3 years old, and that was that was remembered through a regression. And I kept thinking, icky, icky. I grew up with great manners, and I knew that you would never say the word, but I was feeling it, and he felt that I was feeling it. So he's never shown himself in that form since, because it creeped me out watching as the scales would pull away from the foundation. I could see them moving, and I kept thinking it was icky. But he's 7-8 feet tall, greenish brown, a slit for a mouth, amber eyes, loving. But when they look at you with love. He has a very heavy tail that rests on the floor. And his feet are like, I call them alligator feet. They look just like an alligator. He's built like a baseball player, not a football player. He exudes power and demands respect. And he tells me that he is respected by all species of beings. They all respect him. And when I took his picture, I drew a picture of him. He put it in my head, and he made me draw it. And after I drew it, he said right below, write these words, "See me as I am." And I took it with me to a few MUFON meetings, a couple of MUFON meetings, only to be told, ew, he's a reptilian? And I said, I guess. Well, he's a draconian reptilian, and they're evil, and they eat babies. I mean, some of the things I've heard. I didn't care what they said. I loved him. I still love him. And I find myself defending him because all I've ever received is loving messages. One of the messages was, our messages are not for everyone. Many will be left. I always do the quotes because they give too many quotes. Our messages are not for everyone. Many will be left behind. And you ask who we are. You have only to look in the mirror. We are you. We are all one. All memories are packed and taken with us in each new life. When the load becomes too heavy, we travel or become light, knowledge, energy. Now, those are my words, and I've heard other people use those words, but those are my words, and they were given to me by Mr. So whenever you hear the words, they travel as light, knowledge, energy, that's how they travel. And I heard a speaker one time saying that they traveled as light energy. I said to Dr. Wellness, he forgot knowledge. And Dr. Wellness said, yes, and that's a very important part of the message. And it is. So whatever we are always who we are, meaning that our consciousness is always our consciousness. It just goes into a different vessel. So when you have memories or you meet someone that you feel you've known before, it's because it's our consciousness carries all of this with us. You know, there is no death. I was made to draw an illustration. It'll be in my second book. And it's a circle within a circle within a circle. And the outer circle has the words past, present, future. There is no, we are in the past, we are in the future, we are in the now, all at once, maybe in a different dimension. And the answer to everything is so simple. It's so frickin' simple. It's just love. That's it. Love, unity, oneness. So on September of 2011, when I first spoke with Dr. Wellness, and after the third regression, it was like Pandora's box had opened for me. All my memories, everything started surfacing. It was unbelievable. I started getting message after message and images. And in 2015, I had a wonderful experience with Mr. And he was in light knowledge energy form. And he is the size and shape of who he is. But he's a featureless form. But I know it's him. And we're walking down a ramp to the bottom level of the ship, and as we get there, there is this angelic being greeting us, and he has the biggest smile you can imagine. He was all teeth, and he had big fluffy white wings and a long white robe. And I actually felt he was expecting us, and I felt honored that Mr. would be bringing me to this lower level of the ship to show me what he was about to show me, especially since I know nothing about the computer. I mean, literally, if it's not Google or YouTube, I wrote my book in Gmail Compose. So the lower level of the ship is nothing but computer chipboards. And the only time I've ever seen anything like it was a friend of mine had the back of his television off. And I said, that's it. That is what I saw on the ship. The whole bottom of the ship was that. And it was divided into sections. And at each section stood a different angelic being. And they were all busy working. So the only one I saw face on was the one that was greeting us. And they were all working hard, busy. And I understood that they were all different species. They were all representing a different species of being. And they were all working together. The love that I felt, you don't feel it here on earth. It doesn't exist. But it was a unity and a oneness and a love of all of these different. They were each representing a different species of being, is how I understood it to be. And they were all working together for Earth. And I reached up to Mr., who was nothing but energy form, and I said, what are they, angels? They all have wings. And he said, ask them. So I went to look at the smiling angelic being who had greeted us, and he said, we are benevolent beings. We are here to help save the planet. If that makes us angels, then we are. And I didn't want to leave. You could feel the electricity in the air in this room, like a vibrational energy of love. It was beautiful. And a couple months after this incident, Mr. said to me, quote, you now have your wings. And I wrote to David Chase, who has a chapter in the book, and I was really upset. I was crying. I said, I have my wings. What does that mean? Mr.'s leaving me? And David said, no, Mr.'s never going to leave you, and he's not. He just wanted me to know that I had earned my wings. And that's why he took me aboard and let me experience this. I feel so blessed that I got to experience this. Yeah, in fact, the last message that I received was, I was worried about this conference because this is my first speaking engagement, and yeah, I'll tell you, I'm nervous. And I was told, your words will reach the ears for those they are intended. So that's put me at ease. I'm not worried about, being, there's always going to be debunkers and the bullies and, the mockers and the government. We talked about that earlier, the government. And they'll try to make me look crazy. But I speak the truth. And any experiencer, you know it, you can feel it. You feel it in the air, things are happening. It's all around us. I'd love to add this right here. Dr. Sarah Conrath from the University of Michigan did a study, a 20-year study of 14,000 students, college students, to find that today's students are 40% lower in empathy than students of 20 to 30 years ago. I'm going to say that again, 40% lower. Humanity cannot exist without empathy. No species can exist without empathy. So that is why they're here now. because we're at a tipping point. Empathy is at a tipping point right now. And we've got too many people with their fingers on the button, and it's not going to happen, so don't worry about it, because they're not going to let it happen. This is not our planet. It's never been our planet. We treat it like crap. And they've waited long enough, and they have to step in because of what we've done to this planet and what we've become. You see all the people running the countries. Need I say more? We're talking about sociopaths ruling us, and this is terrifying. And it can't continue like this. So, yes, they're going to step in. Yeah, I would like to close by asking everyone that is an experiencer and is holding this inside to please share. Please. It's the only way you're going to heal. You're not going to believe how much better you're going to feel. If you lose family and friends, they weren't yours. You know, they were never your family or friends. I am now with my family and friends. I feel love. And that's the answer, love.